Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Film Seizure. I am Jeff Arbuckle. With me, as always, are my Film Seizure cohorts, Jason Oliver.
Hey.
Hi.
I am the different version of myself.
Mm-hmm.
Have I been duplicated?
Okay.
We should have woke Jason up before this one.
But did we really want to? He is thirsty. Oh boy.
Uh-huh.
I don't know. And you just heard Chuck Moore. Chuck, how's it going?
What's up? Going good.
Good. This week, we are talking about 1978's Invasion of the Body Snatchers from Philip Kaufman. This is pretty much the beginning of a pretty darn good arc that Kaufman will have, with other movies that we could probably talk about on this show. We'll talk a little bit more about.
What were they?
Well, we'll talk about that here in just a second.
All right.
This is often considered to be pretty much what a lot of people think would be a pretty great remake in all. What's interesting is you hear people bitch and moan about remakes today. They were bitching and moaning about this remake until they saw it. In fact, that was it split critics. Either they loved it or they despised the idea that it was remade.
I'm not surprised by that, honestly.
No. But this also probably ended up getting The Thing and The Fly and some of those other movies remade as well. Interestingly, Philip Kaufman never read the book. He liked the old 56 movie, but he never read the book. He just thought, I just want to do another version of that. Which is an interesting way to approach this, I suppose. But it was, but I think most people would agree today that this is, in a lot of ways, I think for a lot of people, this would be their favorite version of this movie. Just because it does have a little bit more, I don't know, it does feel a little bit more like today's world, whereas the 56 one, as good as that is, and it's a really good movie, does feel like it takes place in a completely different time and place and world, and it doesn't really connect to today's society at all, really.
Right, they didn't retro this to make it take place when the original took place. They moved it forward in time, to take place at the current place in time.
Yeah, and a lot of it was because the original one takes place in Santa Mira, which is a fictional town that gets used a lot now because of that movie. We talked about Santa Mira back around Halloween time for Halloween 3. Yep. But it's been used multiple times by multiple people. But this one takes place in San Francisco for two reasons. One, to differentiate itself from the 1956 version. And two, there was when the urban sprawl was kind of happening and when people were moving to cities to be professionals as opposed to staying in smaller towns, or particularly younger people moving to cities, there was a huge concern back then about losing your identity and just kind of becoming part of the masses. And what's really interesting is because San Francisco is a super liberal city, it kind of spins that slightly differently than if you would go and blend into a small town that is usually more conservative. So it is kind of addressing that kind of concern that a lot of people have when friends move to a city. Oh, they're going to be changed, they're going to be different, and it really kind of fits. Plus, it adds for how absolutely successful this invasion could potentially be if they just take over a city.
Yeah, because everyone's so close together.
Yep, exactly. So I guess let me kind of give a kind of a cursory history of the three other times that this book has been turned into a movie here.
Sure.
I did my research. Now, the book was published in 1954. Novel's a lot more graphic about how the pod people, once they're brought to life, the original person just basically just gets reduced to dust. This shows this a little bit more. The 56 version is really kind of sketchy exactly how that works. And the ending of the novel, and that's really important because none of the other movies really kind of follow this the same way, but the ending of the novel, the aliens leave because humanity was fighting back more than they expected, even though they would have won and would have taken over the earth. They just give up.
They're just lazy.
Yeah, basically it's like, oh shit, they're resisting. I guess we better go. It's kind of like it. You know what it reminds me of? There's the Simpsons Treehouse of Horror when Kodos and what's the other? Kang. Kodos and Kang are impersonating Bush and Clinton, and they end up taking over the earth. And then one human comes at them with a board with a nail sticking out of it, and they leave. It's exactly that.
That's funny.
The book is actually very much not liked because it has real sketchy, believable science in it. And a lot of sci-fi people think that it's garbage. But in the 1956 movie, that's Kevin McCarthy and Dana Winter as Matthew and Elizabeth. Kevin McCarthy is like a town doctor. He comes back from vacation. He's got all these people lined up to see him. And then right as they're about to go to their appointment, they cancel. That's a little weird. There's a little bit of a slow build. There's people saying my uncle is acting weird, or my mom is acting weird, stuff like that. What's interesting about that though is that it actually kind of works pretty well as far as the invasion plan, because if you take over a small town, you have a foothold, you can ship all the pods out to all the other cities around it, and then it would exponentially grow. The movie does not when the Elizabeth character in that movie turns, it really is it's pretty dark, because she disappears almost instantly. She just kind of dozes off and she wakes up and she's completely different. And it's kind of shocking how, like, because that's all about these two characters. They've known each other since school. They were high school sweethearts. They ended up both getting married and divorced, which was really kind of weird subplot from 1956 to have divorced people. But then they're just, it's really pretty dark. But the movie doesn't end like people think it does. Most people think that the original ends with Kevin McCarthy running around, stark raving mad, saying they're coming, they're already here, and doing the stuff basically he does in this movie.
It ends with his mom coming home, right?
No.
Isn't that Kevin's name in Home Alone? Sorry. I'm sorry. I was giving you a brief reprieve here.
Kevin McAllister, but
thank you.
That was so far out from left field. It actually, my brain just disconnected from my body, and I just farted it out of my ass.
Sorry. Sorry. I had to spit it out. I was thinking it the whole time, and I couldn't find his actual name. Go ahead.
Okay. No, he actually takes over a UHF station. That's what he does at the end.
I like that
too.
No,
thanks, mister.
Supplies.
There's this whole wraparound story to the first one where he's telling the whole movie in flashback, because he is running around like trying to stop people on the highway, saying, they're coming for us. They're all, they're already here. he gets arrested and gets thrown into the hospital where they're trying to figure out, do we need to take him to the loony bin or not? And at the end, the cops bring in a dead body into the hospital that was killed by being crushed by these giant weird vegetable pods. And everybody now realizes, like, this guy's telling the truth. We better call the army. And it ends on this super happy note that nobody making the movie wanted, but the studio forced them.
Surprising, right?
Right. Yeah. It's like, no, we can't have a dark ending, you know. But yeah, it really, really takes away from what the ending should have been, which was the aliens letting him run away because nobody would believe him anyway.
Right.
But so we're going to talk about the 78 version. The 93 version was directed by Abel Ferreira. And it's really kind of interesting because it takes place in Alabama on an army base, which itself has whole other implications because all of a sudden the aliens have all of these weapons now. And it starts relatively small with Gabrielle Anwar plays the daughter of a environmental protection agency guy. And they're there to check on something. She doesn't want to be there. She's kind of a Gen X kind of disaffected youth, and very anti-war. And in this, whereas before and in most versions of this story, you have people who are like the intellectuals trying to convince everybody else that they should be part of this. This rigidness is already introduced into a place that has rigidity in the army, and therefore it blends in a lot more. And they're the ones who plan to use muscle to take over as opposed to trying to appeal to people's sensibility. And it's a really pretty good movie.
That one's just called Invasion, right? Or is that Body Snatchers?
Body Snatchers, yeah. It ends also with that character who was very anti-war, basically saying that it's only human for them to go to war to fight these things off. So she has a complete change, and she grows dark too by the end of it because, well, her parents are killed by these things. So it's pretty good. Also, Abel Ferreira, because it's Abel Ferreira, depicts the duplication.
Put a naked Harvey Keitel in it.
No, there is a naked Gabrielle Anwar in it, though.
No, okay.
If you're interested in that,
I guess that's improvement.
But he does evoke rape because basically the pods use these tendrils and basically try to force themselves onto Gabrielle Anwar at one point, and she has to fight back against it. And the pods are a lot more forceful in Body Snatchers, which, you know, it just is the slight twist on that.
Right.
It basically ends very similarly to Dawn of the Dead, where her and this guy in the army that's like I don't know if he's like a helicopter technician or a pilot, but her little brother, and he take off. They're hoping to get to the next base to warn them, but if it's already taken over, they just have to fly until they fall asleep, basically. So it's pretty dark. 2007 movie is The Invasion. That's with Nicole Kidman and Daniel Craig. It's poop. Very, very widely disliked, but basically a shuttle brings back the spores from outer space. It acts more like an infection. It gets into you and basically doesn't activate until you fall asleep. And Nicole Kidman's son is immune, which is later used to create a vaccine, and basically everybody is saved. So it even pusses out in that. But good luck giving that to people in 2022. You're fucked.
Yeah, that sounds kind of like The Last of Us in a way, with someone being immune and trying to create a vaccine of their immunities. Interesting. Yeah. But that does suck. I think I saw that one.
Yeah,
actually, and did not like it.
Well, it
Very good.
sucks because it's like, people are changing and turning, and then there's an out to it at the end. There's no stakes at that point.
Right.
Unless I suppose you say, well, I killed somebody because they were acting differently, or somebody acting differently killed somebody. Well, then what do you do?
So you answered this question for this one. Is the rain only used in the 78 version? Do you recall if that's like the transport model?
No, it is unclear. The shuttle is what brought it back in the 2007.
Right.
1993, I think the EPA guy is there and discovers that there's this weird thing already there. In 1956, we come in with Kevin McCarthy into this town that's already been infiltrated.
It's interesting because I got a very heavy like acid rain vibe at the beginning of the 78 version, like it's going with that scare. And I remember that from being a kid, like in the early 80s acid rain. I'm like, they're totally trying to scare people with this acid rain.
Yeah, it's what's interesting is this is the first movie that really explains why the invaders are here. Because it does create a little bit of an interesting philosophical question, because the spores came here because their planet was dying, and if they can travel, does that not mean that they have some sense of ability? Should they be allowed to find some place to move? But I have other ideas about that too. Because I in one regard, it's like, well, they probably, because they don't have any emotions, probably led to their own planet's demise, would be my belief.
I mean, yeah, there's a lot to read in there. I think that they probably have some duty to preserve their life.
Sure.
And,
if they're sentient, they're going to try to survive.
And I think what's more likely is that they, because of their unempathetic way of being, they don't have the same consideration for other life forms than their own.
Yeah, I think
there's a superiority, and they even also try to explain or rationalize what they're doing by saying we're making you better, right?
That's what I was going to say. I think they actually believe that too.
Yeah, they do. I 100% believe they believe that.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean,
sorry to interrupt, Jason.
No, I agree with that too. I think, I'm in my thought of if they were kind of the reason why their own planet did, become uninhabitable, it could be because they don't really have those emotions to really fight to try to stop anything or to try to do something different. So that was just one step beyond that whole idea that they really do believe that they're trying to make things better. It should also be said that the 1956 movie is often cited as a movie that was part of the Red Scare stuff. It absolutely was not made to be that way. Obviously, once something gets into the zeitgeist, then people start to extrapolate stuff. But it was just a scary idea that they were trying to make an entertaining movie out of. They weren't trying to say anything more. So with 1978's version, so let's get into that, I guess. So it starts with the credits showing these kind of gelatinous alien life form things that decide to fly away from their doomed planet, and they ride the solar winds, as we find out later, and get into the atmosphere of Earth, where they get extra help from being rained down. And the first thing they do is they adapt to the vegetation, right? As kind of the ability to kind of breed and survive at that point. Interesting that basically that gelatin life form, that was just something they bought at the store. They put it in water and they realized that it would create these kind of tube-like things.
They
And
look
then,
like transparent balloon animals to me. I was like, hey,
right, they look like if you blow up a condom.
that too.
Yeah, it's like, oh shit, we're being invaded by a bunch of frat boys that are pulling a prank on us or something, you know.
I thought the opening sequence looked really cool. That's
Yeah.
cool that they kind of stumbled onto that. I want to say technology.
I thought it looked
effect.
cool too.
Yeah.
I thought it looked cool too. I thought all the practical effects in this, for the most part, looked pretty good. They didn't try to overdo it.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, they couldn't because they had a low budget.
But it felt grounded, you know, in biology, and I don't know. I really liked it. Especially I like that opening sequence.
Yeah.
To me, I didn't think about the acid rain aspect of it, but I did think about the environmental aspect of, you know, the planet kind of turning on its inhabitants, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. I see that.
The first person that we really basically see is Elizabeth Driscoll, who is Brooke Adams. She is kind of just walking along a park, and she sees this weird little pod thing on a plant. But we also see Robert Duvall's cameo where he's a creepy priest just staring at things.
So that was Robert Duvall.
It is, yeah.
I was like, that looks like Robert Duvall, and why is he dressed like a priest on a swing staring creepily? Yeah.
Yeah.
That was.
I thought the exact same thing.
And he's never seen again.
He's never seen again, but in the commentary that Kaufman did for this movie, he does say that he was the first person converted by the pods.
Okay.
Because that's something that we're going to see in this first act is a lot of people doing bizarre things.
Okay.
And so he's just staring. There's this teacher that has this field trip of kids, and she's telling them to pick the pods. When Brooke Adams walks away, she just turns and looks at Brooke Adams. Why would she do that if there isn't something already kind of going on?
Right.
And later,
take them to your parents.
Yeah, exactly. And then later, as she's kind of walking to, as you know, we later see as she's kind of walking around the city, we see people in the background that are just kind of paying, you know, they're doing their own thing, but then all of a sudden you just see somebody who looks like he's running for his fucking life, you know, and it's like, what's he doing? It's like somebody late to catch a plane, but you don't see that usually on the streets unless you see some commotion around it. And so, and then later there's a creepy guy in the health department office who's just looking out the fucking door's window at people as they walk by. There's a lot of weird stuff in the background of this, and this is kind of a masterclass in your shot composition type of cinematography and design work. These extras are actually doing things, and one of those extras is Academy Award winner.
Yeah.
So funny that was that. I'm not crazy because I was looking. I was like, that looks like a dead ringer for Robert Duvall.
Because he is a dead ringer for Robert Duvall because he's a pod person.
Because he's a pod person. Yeah.
Well, I'll ask later because you'll know. But the guy that ran into Sutherland's car, obviously, I know who that is too.
Oh yeah,
but I can't remember who it is.
That's Macaulay. That's Macaulay Culkin. Yeah,
it's Kevin McCarthy.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
I've got that.
Since we're being silly at this moment, can I ask another question? Did Brooke Adams' pod person go on to be Karen Allen?
She is very much Karen Allen. Yeah, which is interesting because the next two things that Kaufman did was he directed a movie called The Wanderers, which was an early movie for Karen Allen, and then he co-wrote Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Right. Yeah. Interesting.
So
the answer is yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, well, now we got two of them. What are we gonna do?
I guess we'll make some money off of her.
Yeah. One of them can do the weird eye thing, the other one can't. So I guess the one who can't can be Karen Allen.
The weird eye thing is is weird.
It is
weird.
very weird. But funny too. I mean, that's a fun scene. But anyway,
I thought that was going to be used as a recognition moment later in the film.
Yeah, the first time I saw this, I thought the same thing. I was like, oh, he'll use that to differentiate between her pod person or something.
Right.
Do the weird eye thing, and they'll be like, ooh.
But technically, I think the pod person would at least know about it.
That's true.
Yeah. So when Elizabeth takes this thing home, she's like, I've never seen a plant like this. I'm going to look it up. And she discovers that it at least seems like something that's called a Grex, which basically is thematically pretty good because Grex are plants that basically can take over other plants' space and basically kill them and force them out of a garden or of a place. That doesn't make her want to throw it away though, which proves to be an undoing. But so Matthew later we meet is Donald Sutherland, and Donald Sutherland is a very forceful actor. Like that's
70s Donald Sutherland.
Oh, he is there. He is there, and he is into it. A lot of people said that he was very aloof and very distant from people on the set, but he claims he had an excellent, fun time making the movie. So I'm just guessing that Donald Sutherland is just a rage monster in the 70s.
I mean, yeah. What year was Don't Look Now? Because he's
75, I think.
He's insane in that too.
Yeah, and probably actually had real sex in that movie on film.
That's the rumor. Yep.
We may have to talk about that one at some point. That's a good flick.
That's a good one.
That's a real good flick. But yeah, so he's going he's going to a French restaurant, and it seems like he kind of wants to bring this place down.
100%.
Yeah, because he says later that they were overcharging people anyway, so fuck them. But he discovers a rat turd, or possibly a caper.
Right.
But who wants to?
You eat it.
You eat it then if it's a caper. But all of the chefs there get pissed at him, and they bust his windshield, which he has for the rest of the movie.
Mm-hmm. It's a weird way to introduce him, right? Because you're supposed to maybe get the sense that he's good at his job, or he's a bit of a crusader, right? But yeah, it does feel like he's got a bit of a vendetta against this particular restaurant.
Right, because when he gets back to the office, he's like, I got those sons of bitches. It's like, wow.
Well, yeah, and somebody brings in a rat, like he's trying to frame them, like the whole time. And even Karen Allen, I'm going to say, she thinks it's a caper too. Like, right. I'm pretty sure it's a caper. And he's just trying to take this place down.
Right. He's like, who cares? And then the guy brings in the rat, he's like, I don't need it anymore. So yeah, but
I wrote down rat-tat-turdy.
Rat-tat-turdy.
I have no way to apply that, but it cracks me up.
Phenomenal.
But that just so happened to be the name of that restaurant. They didn't realize. That's why he was like, I'm going to bring these sons of bitches down.
They're operating in
plain sight.
In plain sight, yeah. Nobody sees this, and they're charging $100 a plate.
Yeah,
love it.
One thing he likes to do is he likes to cut newspaper clippings out. I think this is kind of like his. I think he kind of has a room like Colin Firth has in The Kingsman, where he's got like all of his successful takedowns. But what we don't see,
room.
The trophy room. What we don't see, or what we don't see him react to, is a newspaper article about there being webs shrouding the city.
Yeah.
But he and so Matthew and Elizabeth, they have I like their relationship a lot. Like, because they are they are obviously either long time or just exceptionally close friends. I mean, it's clear later that they have more than that for each other, but they just seem like just really, really good friends, and there isn't anything forced with that. And it makes much more sense later when they go over the line towards admitting that they love each other. Is probably because, quite frankly, that's all they've got left.
Yeah,
are each other.
But I also think that it is, it could very well just be platonic as well. I mean,
Absolutely.
They do share a kiss, but I mean, a platonic
but again,
love,
that's a heightened situation,
right?
At that
right,
point,
exactly.
Yeah, but I mean,
right.
throughout the whole movie, it really just seemed like
But he doesn't. But Matthew does not approve of her boyfriend.
No,
that's clear.
He doesn't, which could still be platonic.
Yes, it could.
Although Jeff Goldblum's like, oh, this is the Elizabeth.
Yeah.
Jeff Goldblum is a fucking maniac in this movie.
Yes. He's the kind of guy that you just, I don't even know if they explain the room to him. They just put him in it and say react
just
to things.
Go. They pull his cord and they just let him go. Yeah. It's like the only thing that they gave him was, you're jealous of Leonard Nimoy.
Yeah.
Go.
Yeah.
That whole mirror, like when he's in the mirror talking, I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to pass out from this weirdness.
So, but anyway, she, and she's got the boyfriend that she lives with named Jeffrey. And now that's Art Hindle. We've talked about him previously.
Yep.
This is part of a string of successes for him too. This is the middle one because he was in Black Christmas, and then he was in this, and then the Brood.
Yep.
But yeah, he's kind of aloof too, though. Like he cares more about the Warriors game. He sits there watching TV with headsets on, and when he doesn't have the headsets on, he has the TV audio blaring. So it's like she can't even communicate with him whatsoever. But she also kind of leaves her little Grex in a glass of water next to his side of the bed. And when she wakes up the next morning, he's dressed to the nines, and he's brushing up the broken glass. And he seems a little weird now. He was weird before. He's a lot more weird now.
According to Sutherland, that might be an improvement, right?
Right, exactly.
Right.
It's pretty funny.
If Donald Sutherland doesn't like your partner, take that into consideration, because he is not going to let it go.
No.
He is going to tell you what he thinks about that person. So then, so basically, she watches him take a wastebasket that's full of dust out to the garbage man. So again, this dust, this kind of awkwardness around everything is starting to kind of build. And this is about the time, because she goes to talk to Matthew about it. And she, and they're kind of joking about them being, about people being different or whatever. And that's when she does the weird eyeball thing where she can roll her eyes super fast. And that is off-putting.
It's wild.
It's weird. It's like, it's not even like an eye roll. It's sort of like an eye vibrate.
Yeah, because they kind of bulge a little bit too. It's weird.
It's freaky. It's freaky.
Weird. I bet Tony Shalhoub looked at that and it's like, that's the woman I'm going to marry.
Can she actually do that though, for real?
Yes.
Like, I couldn't tell if that was an effect or if
that was not an effect.
That is not an effect. She can do that.
That's amazing. Scares the shit out of me. They really should have used that more. I wish they did, honestly.
Yeah, it was just something where it's like that was just talked about on, it's like, because she didn't audition for this movie. She met Philip Kaufman and he's like, hey, you want to do this movie? And that's it. But she had never done nude before, and so she was terrified of that. But she'll do the eyeball thing for you on command.
She should have done it while she was nude and screaming.
Yeah, you want me to go full frontal while I'm doing the eyeball thing too? Then.
That's funny.
I don't know if the screen could have taken that much hot. So basically she's talking about how different Jeffrey is and everything like that. And so Matthew's like, hey man, I'm friends with Leonard Nimoy and he knows some things. Why don't you come with me to this book release or whatever and talk to him? I'm sure he'll talk to you. We're in good. And
he'll eliminate some things, like if he became a Republican. There's really funny things that he says he could eliminate because she's a little bit worried that he's a psychiatrist and
right.
Yeah, and it's like, no, he'll help us eliminate some things. That's all.
Right, exactly. And so he starts telling the joke, to which she ruins we never find out the punchline, which is unfortunate. But that's when Kevin McCarthy jumps on their hood and it's like, they're already here, they're coming for you, and he takes off running and there's a whole group of people chasing them. These are all weird things. Like I would be very unnerved if I saw this happening.
Later, I don't know if their reaction later you see Kevin McCarthy and he says, you guys give up or you're thirsty for more. I'm just gonna keep rolling with that joke.
Please. Please do, you filthy animal. But yeah, I don't think they even react strongly enough to this weirdness because she's already seeing weird things. Sutherland, to me, in this movie is way too hard to tip over as far as like believing what you have to do.
All she had to do was charge people too much to hear her story, and then he would have gotten in.
Yeah.
He would have planted rat turds everywhere.
You know what I mean, though, right?
No,
he's very...
Well,
he doesn't even bring up the fact that he saw a laundromat person who said something exactly the same as her when they meet. It's Bidner, right? Or Kibner?
Kibner.
I wrote it down. Kibner, thank you. But go ahead.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing also, because, like, he doesn't, like, a couple of things. It seems as though he, like we were talking about, like how he has this kind of really interesting, mostly platonic for most of the movie, relationship with Elizabeth. And it seems like they are almost like kids at times, where it's like they hang out with each other to not deal with the things that are bothering them. And when she starts introducing things that are bothering, he's trying to lighten the situation up.
But he's also the guy who saw a foreign substance in a soup that could have been a caper and immediately identified it as a rat turd.
Well, but he's been totally against
for
a while.
But you know, I mean, I think it's a good point, though. He's totally like, he should be able to see this. Right. That's his personality.
But we also determined that the rat turd was probably a caper.
Right, that's true too.
Because he's really just trying to take down this place.
Right.
So,
well, this is where he starts to get shaken, I think, because he realizes that there was an accident, that, you know, this guy is now dead and nobody is reacting to him. The people chasing him are not reacting to him at all.
Not even the cop.
Not even
the cop is just standing there.
Right. And he calls the cops and he can't get anything straight on that. He's got Jeff Goldblum fucking raging on cocaine or something, chirping at him, taking the phone from him. It's like, what seems to be the problem, officer? It's like, you're going to get everybody arrested or replaced. He would be a very, very unreliable person to have in this scenario.
Well, he's just a poet that's on cocaine, right? I thought he might be another psychiatrist the way it was framed in the beginning.
No, he's a poet. He just hates anybody who gets a book published that he can't. So he gets to Kibner's book release thing. Jeff Goldblum hates Leonard Nimoy. And apparently they all hang out sometimes, because later we find out that they never agree on anything and they hate each other. but they're always around each other. And he's trying to get the cops to try to find out what the hell happened on the way to the bookstore. Elizabeth hears a woman asking Kibner about her husband, who's now acting differently. And he basically, Kibner's part in this, at least in these scenes for right now, I feel like he is the type of person who cannot eliminate scientific things, no matter how much he's told that these things are happening. Like, he's not the guy, he can't go to the next level to eliminate those types of things from his own training to be able to see, then it must be the unlikely thing that's happening. Does that make sense?
It does make
sense.
Go ahead, Jason. I have a question too, though, after you.
I think that first and foremost, he's going to look for a psychological answer to something that seems fantastical, which a good doctor should probably do.
Well, sure, but
the second thing is that he might be a pot person.
Well, yes, we don't know when he was converted.
Right.
That's what my question was going to be. I think he's a pod person the entire time, but you don't know.
I think this was a question I wanted to bring up. So
yeah.
Yes.
So we're getting there because that's in my notes too. But yeah, it's like, well, the first thing that he tries to say to discount why two people have the exact same complaints is that then it must be something biological that's an infection that's causing people to think this way, to which then
and it is.
Well, it is. Yeah, I mean it is, but
I mean he's right.
Right, it's almost like he's tipping his hand if he's already been converted.
You're right.
But and then like Matthew's like, well, is it, if this is the case, is it
contagious?
Contagious. To which Kibner's like, you just take her home.
Don't be an idiot.
Don't. Yeah. But he's like, no, I'm being serious. And it's like, he can't, like, he dismisses it as something that's outside of his field, which is possible, but it's like, as a psychiatrist, he should know if there is a disease that can give people the same
thoughts,
the same hallucinations, if that's what they are. So yeah, he is kind of, at this point, to the audience, he is seemingly the type of person who can't make the leap to the more unlikely things that are going on.
Well, they're using his former Spockness against us here.
Exactly. That is why he is cast here. Kaufman specifically cast him to break him from that typecasting Spock. Yeah.
Fair. But he still acts like Spock, and we think of him as a logical person, and we, the fact that and I guess we're getting there. I'm sorry, I'm going before, but the fact that we think he's emotionless by nature because he was Spock,
right,
is totally used against us here. It's funny. Right. It's kind of cool, kind of clever.
Yeah,
really.
Yeah, it's both used against us and against the type that he's the heroic emotionless person.
True.
Yeah. So basically, also he leans against a dumpster full of fucking shreds of carcasses.
I love that. Yeah. How much of that is going on throughout the entire movie.
Yeah,
and
it's like
more and more trucks are coming.
Shit? Yeah.
It's awesome.
Again, this is the masterful of everything in the shot is doing something.
Right.
Every shot, something has stuff going on in layers behind it. So basically they send Jeff Goldblum home to where his wife Nancy, who Nancy was played by Morticia Addams in the original one. Yep. Now she's played by Veronica Cartwright, who runs this mud bath. And she has all of these plants around, and it's like, you know where this is headed. And one of her customers has gave her a weird plant, and one of her customers hates the fact that she plays music, and she's like, no, plants can hear music, they're happier this way, which is somewhat true, actually. There is some truth to that, even though she believes in other wacky things, like ancient aliens.
But it allows her to arrive at the correct conclusion.
She arrives
magically.
Immediately she knows what the fuck is going on.
It's kind of funny.
Yeah, but so
yeah, she's the kind of conspiracy theorist who is like the broken clock is right. Yeah,
twice
exactly.
a day. Exactly.
Twice a day. Exactly.
Exactly. Yep. The reason why she believes that these things are happening is kooky, but she knows what's up. And she's right about something later too.
Yeah, she is.
So anyway, so she's cleaning up the place and finds a body, a weird, hairy, featureless body. It has some features, but it's mostly it has no fingerprints. It has no real discernible facial features outside of the typical eyes, nose, mouth. And they call Matthew over to look at it because sure. Because when you got a Donald Sutherland in your speed dial, you get him. That's what that is.
Right.
I would call Donald Sutherland if I needed a problem solved. Maybe not anymore. He's super old now. But
call
back
Kiefer
then,
instead.
Okay, sure, because Kiefer is a madman now too.
Yeah. Give him 24 hours. He'll take care of it.
Exactly. So he comes over and looks, and it begins to. He's like, "How tall are you, Jack? How much do you weigh?" Because the body is starting to seem like it's there for Jack. And when Jack kind of starts to doze off, more things happen with the body, like it opens its eyes, its nose bleeds, which the reason why his nose bleeds is actually pretty funny because he gets it from his own wife, because she flips out and hits him in the nose.
Right, with the door.
Right, yeah.
Or maybe it's her that hits him.
It's one, yeah, basically she's the cause of his own bloody nose. But then, so he's like, that's weird. And now he's starting to piece together some things. And he's like, I better call my buddy Elizabeth, see what she's doing. And that seems weird. I'm going to go and get her. You call Kibner, to which, like, I'm sure Jeff Goldblum's like, well, what the fuck is he going to do? Yeah.
Right.
And Kibner comes over and he's like, there's no body here. And he's like, what do you mean there's no, it was right over there. Of course, he was the only person who could have gone into that room at that point. And there's an open window where the body has been tossed out. Probably.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, it's just, you guys are all weirdos. It's like, there's nothing here. Well, then meanwhile, Matthew has gone to get Elizabeth. He breaks into her apartment, basically sneaks around without Jeffrey finding him. And he does find one thing in their plant room, which is an almost formed duplicate of Elizabeth. And he's like, well, I got to get her the fuck out of here. So
he's the true body snatcher. Because that's what
right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Because he then goes and snatches her.
Yes.
Yeah. Now there is one thing that's important to when people are being duplicated, they're basically being sucked of all of their fluids because they start getting chapped lips, they get skin peeling off of them. It's kind of a gross situation. And they get really,
you can see
really
it on
thirsty.
Goldblum in the other scene too.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, his whole mouth area is later it even creates a cold sore on Elizabeth.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's kind of a gross situation when you're getting duplicated. But anyway, so he shows up with Elizabeth and he's saying there was a whole other body there. We're calling the cops. We're going to go over there and take a look. But of course the cops don't find the body either. And to which Matthew's like, well, of course they didn't because Jeffrey got rid of it. It's like, come on, it's like this obvious here, right? It's like, of course he's starting to grow a little crazier. but he's not wrong. He just has no way to prove anything.
No, because he sounds like a lunatic, because he's saying he's admitting to taking Elizabeth out of there, while also saying she was still there. Like, who's going to believe her or him, right?
And then, and Jeffrey's like, well, I'm not going to press any charges or anything. If Dr. Kibner says she's fine, that's good enough for me. And it's like, that's not great.
Right.
That seems a little suspect.
A little bit.
But then, basically at this point, they're trying to figure out, like, okay, and Kibner's listening to everybody's story. And this is when Veronica Cartwright, Nancy, says, it's like, well, it's obviously some sort of an invasion and they're replacing us, just like how the aliens came to us thousands of years ago and had sex with monkeys.
Yep. But she's technically dead on. She calls it an outer space flower, and she right.
They find out that the flowers are starting to show up in just regular bouquets that are being left for people, or that the pods are.
Right.
But so Kibner's like, yeah, nah. Why don't everybody just sleep on this? It's like, okay, yeah. So yeah, and Matthew decides he's going to start calling some people that he knows that are in government positions. This guy who shares an office for investigators at the place that finds rat turds in restaurants has connections out the ass. He can talk to the mayor, he can talk to people in Washington, but he's trying to call, and this is a really cool scene because this is where he's basically trying to call people from payphones. He's trying to he's being told to wait and they'll get a call back, and he's going to other payphones and getting calls, and he's just walking around and seeing weird things. And also the phone calls start to take different turns. Whereas before, it sounds like people do want to hear what he has to say. Some people are saying, hey, we don't want to, we don't want to create a panic, so only talk to me. And then it starts to sound a little bit more sinister, to the point where then people start disbelieving him. And then also, all of a sudden, everybody who had previously reported problems with the people they know are now saying, no problem at all, everything's great. It's like,
but not with that much emotion.
Right. Well, I don't know, that the Asian laundromat guy, he was pretty happy.
He's a little too happy, I think.
Yeah, he's got that big old grin, kind of.
Yeah, right.
I agree, Jeff. I wanted to say one thing about the telephone calls. While I'm watching that scene, it's really kind of fun to listen carefully and closely to see, okay, who is a pod person and who isn't at this point, right? And I that's a movie I'd like to see. And I don't know if the Abel Ferrara movie goes kind of more into that side of the bureaucracy with the military, but man, that'd be a really kind of a fun scene, or a fun movie to see, is that aspect of it, the bureaucratic, the legislative branch, the investigative branches, and how they're slowly taking over, and what that looked like. Yeah. And
what I really like about that is because the scene ends up, the way that it's cut, the way that the sound and the score of it becomes maddening, and you're overwhelmed by it. And it's like, I would be sitting there thinking, it's like, shit, I don't know what to do about this. Yeah, it's like you're kind of screwed. And it's at this point, that's when you start realizing that more so than anybody else, maybe Matthew is like, he's kind of all in at this point, and he's going to try to forcefully figure out a solution here, somewhat to his own detriment. But he ends up getting back to the apartment where Jack and Nancy and Elizabeth are, and they're going to basically hole up there. And Jack and Elizabeth fall asleep, and he goes out to his garden or whatever outside, like his porch, and he ends up falling asleep. And there's some pods there, and this is when things get real gross. A Cronenberg is born here.
Yeah, a little bit.
Where you start seeing how the pods actually work, and they kind of crap out a person, and it's a real scary muck monster like thing, and it slowly starts to become whoever it is that's asleep nearby. I will say that it's never exactly clear in these first two versions, much more clear in the Abel Ferrara one, where it's like a pod shows up next to somebody sleeping, and the tendrils go in and get up into their brain and get into all of their orifices and basically sucks themselves out into the duplicate. This one and in the first movie seem to work kind of differently. Like there's no, like, do they have to be in contact? Do they just, because there's Elizabeth and Jack are being duplicated from several dozens of feet away from the, whereas
yeah, technically Nancy would have probably seen the tendrils if she's awake with
right.
Yeah,
exactly.
but,
it is a little bit ambiguous, which does kind of bug me a little bit about this movie is because you never get a really good sense of how this is happening,
right,
in the biological sense. Because even Jeff Goldblum in the mud bath, which are those sanitary or mud baths sanitary? They seem really gross.
I don't know.
He falls asleep again. He's like, I'm just gonna think for a minute, right? And he he falls asleep again, and his double starts to react,
right,
but he's not connected. Yeah.
And this scene makes it seem like it takes way longer than it took for the Jeff Goldblum body to be created.
Yeah.
Like, how did that happen so quick? So it is very inconsistent.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't
where
ruin
was
the movie,
the pod?
but it is
like where was the pod? Yeah, exactly.
Both this and the original movie almost make it seem like it's more of a mental connection that gets established between the duplicate and the person being duplicated.
Yeah, because the pods here on the porch are ginormous. In the whole movie, I'd been thinking it's just this small pod that was in, the size of the flower that everyone's getting is what does the replication, but obviously not.
Well, and those the point, I guess, with the actual physicality of the pods themselves, some are small, some are huge, some are huger. They're just super adaptive.
Yeah, they are.
So it's like they're the most adaptive thing in the universe, which also I think plays into something later too that I'll bring up. But yeah, so anyway, Nancy realizes he's fallen asleep and she's seeing the grossness happening, and so she yells at him to wake him up, and he wakes up and he sees what's going on. He's like, oh, what the fuck? And at that point also he's like, wake Jack and Elizabeth, because he realizes there's three that are happening. And this also he tries to call the police again, and this time the operator knows who he is, so they're on to him. And then he's also, we did skip one thing. When Kibner left earlier in the day, and he's like, everybody should just sleep on this. He gets into a car with Jeffrey, and he's like, not this, give it time or whatever. It'll happen. But so he's already been duplicated, and like we said, we don't know when, because it is really ambiguous with that character. But
and he's giving Elizabeth, or is it Elizabeth?
Yeah.
Sorry, sleeping pills and telling Donald Sutherland, like, hey, you need to get some sleep. He's very, very overly telling everyone to get some sleep all the time.
Right. Yeah. That is his job in this new society. Is like, you just tell everybody to go to sleep.
Yeah, that's you do that part.
Yeah, you do that. He should just give him the Vulcan neck pinch. That'll
probably.
Yeah. Anyway, so he then right, so he then tries to call the police, and it's like, well, Mr. Bennell, we can't get through. He's like, wait, I didn't give you my name. And Jeff Goldblum's like, hang up the fucking phone, guy. It's like you're found out, and yet he's still trying to figure out. It's like, how do you know my name? And Donald Sutherland will not let anything go once he gets a sniff of something. He will not let it go.
Right.
Then he tries to call his pal in the Justice Department or in the Defense Department or something out in Washington. And the operator comes in. It's like, well, Mr. Bennell, who are you trying to reach? It's like, I didn't go through the operator.
Yeah, I made a direct call.
Yeah, and it's like all the while they're getting the other pod people in the area are starting to converge on them. So they have to go on the run at this point.
But first, he has to smash his own face in.
He smashes his own face in. He doesn't want to smash the others. He just wants to smash his own.
Well, he sees Elizabeth, and he's like, "That's the woman I platonically love, or love not platonically."
Or it's like things are going to turn here real soon. So they take off, and they are basically herded to a dead end. And there's also helicopter pod people.
Yeah.
And Jack is like, I'll draw them off, so you guys can get away. And Nancy's like, no, you're not going without me. And they run off, and they basically force the mob to go the other way. Now, Matthew and Elizabeth almost figure out something that Nancy figures out later. And they try to walk along the street among the pod people. And this is a pretty cool scene because you see them, you see their feet walking and every now and then turning around or whatever. And then you see other people's feet walking the opposite way until they stop. And like they kind of start facing each other, and then they turn around and start following them. So they're not able to blend in.
No.
They try to get a cab to go to the airport. The cab driver is the director of the original movie. That was his cameo.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
And he's like, so you got business out of town, eh? It's like starting to ask a few too many questions that a cabbie wouldn't ask.
Well, yeah, and his call out of I repeat, type H is pretty obvious. They should have been like, "This is a bad situation."
It's almost like he was like winking at his CB.
Yeah,
or at us. It's like, wink.
Could you see that? I'm winking.
I repeat, type H, everybody.
I'm winking so hard, both my eyes are winking. Well, they get stopped at a roadblock, and cops are like dragging people out of the cars and stuff. And the guy pulls them. He's like, "Yeah, I got two in the back." And then the camera pans over, and it's just an open door. They take off. They eventually make it back to their Department of Health office, and they're going to hole up there for a little bit. And that's, but as time passes, it's like it's starting to seem like people know they're there. This is also when they have their first tiny little kiss, and then, but the next day, phone is starting to ring constantly, and it's like they know we're here.
I have a question here.
Yeah.
And maybe this is just another inconsistency, because clearly they're sleeping and they wake up and then they tell each other they can't go to sleep. They're sleeping under the desk. It's like totally weird. And then they wake up to the phone ringing and they're like, "Hey, you cannot go to sleep." So theoretically, they should have been taken over at this point, but whatever.
Probably. I mean, I guess it depends on, are there any pods around, right?
Yeah, the pods just auto-magically appear now, though.
Well, there's enough of them around.
Yeah.
So they, it's like they know we're here, and here comes some people outside the office, and in walks Leonard Nimoy and Jeff Goldblum. And Jeff Goldblum's like, it would have just been easier if we'd have fallen asleep last night. It's just instead of all of this. And he says something about, Kibner says something about how, it really would have been for the best. And he's like, yeah, he's right. And Donald Sutherland's like, what do you mean? You guys never agree with him on anything.
But that we also get the explanation that supposedly your memories will be transferred over. You'll just be a better version of yourself.
Right.
And there'll be no more love and there'll be no more hate. And then like everything's just going to be great.
Yeah. And that's really the, that's the real philosophical question about all this, right? It's like, what makes you you, right? And like obviously you can have experiences without emotion, so that's your experience is part of you. But what's really better, to remain what you are with all of the good and bad, or to evolve? And a lot of people are scared of change, and evolution is like the ultimate change, right? And is the loss of emotion worth the loss of your differences and having equality and the not hating each other and living relatively peacefully? That it's one of those questions where it's like we only answer one way because of what we are, and it's one of those things where it's like in tumultuous times, everybody says, gosh, it would be nice if everybody got along, but there would be sacrifice in that.
It'd be at the expense of choice. Like who would want that?
Right. And what people don't often realize is that not everybody can think the same way you do. Because at that point, that's going to be unworkable too.
Right, because that's what you're eventually saying, is that everybody is thinking the same way. And this is why this makes such a great communist Red Scare movie, right? Because of that idea. Like it's, if everyone in society thought the same way, then there wouldn't be any conflict. But that's just unrealistic.
Right.
It's never going to happen.
After a while, that's gonna dull and stop progress of any kind. And it doesn't even have to be.
There's no ambition. There's no
need to change anything unless it's collectively agreed upon.
There's no curiosity.
Right.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, it's something that, it's like we all yearn for there not to be these types of things, but there would be a loss that may not be acceptable, even if what we're trying to remove would be agreeable to everyone to get rid of. The cost may be a little too high. It's like, it kind of also plays into the idea of, stuff like making it easier for things to be more, what's the word I'm looking for? Making it easier for people to listen in on your phone calls, or to be able to intercept emails or whatever, for the sake of safety. You're giving up a lot for that sake of safety, and that's that is not something that is acceptable to a large majority of people. So yeah, I mean, so this is where Jason, you had asked, should we hold this off until Halloween, because this is a little bit of a horror movie, but I say it is less a horror movie and more of an existential horror, which makes it a little bit more of a less your typical monster jumping out at you, and more your there's some stuff to really think about here that would be terrifying to lose.
But it does have a creepy Dogman Pop person.
Oh boy, that dog
creepy my ass. I laughed okay, so we haven't gotten there yet, but I don't think I'd ever seen this movie, and I had it been a long time. That cracked me up. I couldn't even watch the last 20 minutes of the movie. I mean, I did, but I was laughing so hard at that dog.
Well, it is funny because so all right, so at this point, David comes, or
that evokes like Clark Carpenter's The Thing kind of stuff there.
It definitely does. So Kibner comes in, and he's going to give them drugs to force them to sleep. And this is a really good line. As he's injecting Donald Sutherland, he says, "David, you're killing me."
I like that one too.
Because yes, he is going to have his memories, and yes, all of these things are going to be transferred over. But what really makes him who he is, or the way he sees it, is going to be lost in that.
Right. And it's important to note that just before all these people showed up, they took 5 like basically trucker speed pills.
Yeah, right. Which is funny because it's like, what is that? It's like, it's speed. It's like, well, how many are you supposed to take? 1, take 5.
Take 5. Yeah. Very smart.
Yeah. So at this point, he does fight back. Matthew fights back. He knocks out David, and he kills Jack with these darts from. They just have a dartboard in the office where there's a lot of breakable things. It's great.
Right.
In the lab, rather, and he kills his own friend Jack basically. But at this point, he doesn't.
Jack's already dead.
The way he sees it, yeah, absolutely. They run into Nancy, and she reveals that she's still normal, and she keeps asking, "Have you seen Jack?" To which Matthew's just kind of like, it changes the subject immediately.
Hey, he's like, we're gonna get this figured out. We're gonna fix this. Yeah.
But that's where she tells him that if they can only detect visually if you're one of them. They have no other concept around that you've been converted or not if you don't show emotion. So it's like, yeah, I've been walking around them for hours and they haven't caught on. So they get.
She also they addressed the question of sleep, and she's like, we just watch each other, right?
Yeah.
And I was kind of trying to think. I was thinking like, man, why don't we have more of like a group of people finding each other who have kind of figured out as a community how to fight back? And that's where I feel
would
like
be an interesting other version of this movie. Yeah.
That's where I kind of like the third act of this movie for me just kind of devolves a bit, right? Because there does seem to be a pointlessness to all of his actions, right? And it's just kind of like even when he's like dropping light bulbs on their pods, it's just like, all of this seems futile, right?
Right. Well,
and because of that, it feels like the third act there's no purpose in it, and it kind of bugs me.
Well, I look at it slightly differently, and we'll get there. But yeah, so they go outside. They're herded into a line where they got to go and pick up some pods and load them up for the next city. And this is where Elizabeth and them see and the rest of them see the busker's dog. He's the man-faced dog now. And she freaks out, and Elizabeth freaks out, which is interesting because in the original film, they figure out, Matthew and Elizabeth figure out that they can walk among them if they don't show any emotion. And they figure that out on their own. And she breaks that when a dog runs out into the street and is almost hit by a truck. And so again, it's a dog that gets to Elizabeth to show off her emotions, which then of course gets them in trouble. But they are able to get away through a box truck where they are taken to this warehouse that's full of pods. And he's like, oh man, they're harvest. It's like a whole farming industry sort of deal now. It's a little bit beyond their ability to stop, but they fight on. Elizabeth ends up hurting her ankle, and he carries her off, and then they find a place where they can kind of hide, but then they start hearing music. And they're like, oh, their ships are playing the music. They can get on the ships and they can get away from it all. Stay here. I'm going to go check it out. Now, in the original, it's very similar. They hear Hispanic music, I think, and they think that it's like a little Hispanic family. But when he gets there and he investigates, he realizes there's a whole bunch of pods and it's only the radio playing. To which point he's like, he goes back and he finds out that Elizabeth fell asleep. And when he's kind of trying to wake her up and kind of holding on to her, she just disintegrates. It's pretty gross. Pretty cool
awesome.
effect. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then her duplicate pops up and she tries to like convince him. It's like, hey, why don't you just be one of us? It's cool.
I'm nude. Come on
I'm
over
nude.
here.
Hey, it's cool.
Yeah.
It's cool. We don't have
We
to
could
wear
just
clothes.
be nudes now.
Yeah, we can be nudes. It'll be, you know, it's good. It's good.
We could be nudes.
Yeah. But then he goes and he destroys the warehouse by like, you know, this is I'll get to it here in a minute. But anyway, so he's cutting some wires, which is causing them to short and cause fires and everything is going to hell. She's walking through the warehouse nude. She's still nudes. And like, you know, trying to find him or whatever. And basically it just kind of, you know, and the idea is like, well, he can't stay awake forever at this point. Now, I don't think that while you are right, Jason, in saying that, you know, there is a futility to it, this is his last vestiges of his individuality, is just to be angry and fight back.
Oh, I understand his reaction. I just that's not as interesting a movie.
Sure.
That's all I'm saying.
I mean, which is really only about a 5-minute sequence at this point, where like it kind of devolves to just him working on his natural reaction to everything.
That's where I'm just like, the whole third act to me feels just so futile. There's just
it's bleak.
I just wish it went in another direction. Like I was more fascinated by Veronica Cartwright's group of people that she found, keeping each other awake, making sure the pods weren't affecting them. Like that was really interesting.
Yeah.
Let's jump to them and then fight, right?
Sure.
But anyway.
I mean, well, and there is something there where like a TV series, almost like a Walking Dead type of TV series, could be spun out of this, which I do think that somebody does own rights with the intent to make it into a TV series.
Yeah.
But anyway, they so the next morning comes and you see, you know, Matthew's walking around the city. He sees some school buses show up with children being delivered to be converted. You know, and he goes to the health department. He sees, you know, Elizabeth, and everybody's just kind of standing around. They don't really, I mean, what's the point in even going to work, right? But they're still doing what their memories, I mean, they're doing what their lives were. They just
they went there, but they're not doing anything.
Right. Yeah, they went there. Yeah, it's kind of like, again, it's kind of like Dawn of the Dead, where, you know, people are still doing what they would be doing. They just don't have any reason for it anymore.
Right.
And then he's sitting there, he's still cutting out articles and stuff like he did before. And then he's walking around, and he sees Nancy, and she expects him to be as he was when they last saw each other, but he sounds the alarm. And the interesting thing about the ending of this was it was not in the script. They came up with it during the filming.
What was the original end? Do you know?
I think the original.
It's a great ending. The ending is iconic. Yeah.
The ending was he and Nancy were going to still be unconverted, or, you know, whatever,
on the run.
They did not tell Veronica Cartwright that was how it was going to end.
Cool.
So her reaction is a little bit more natural.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So yeah, and they shot it, and they show, you know, that they even that was one of the things that Philip Kaufman met with the original director and Kevin McCarthy, and it's like, so we're going to remake this. What would you like to see in the remake? And they're like, we want to see more humor between the characters, because that's natural, and we want it to be darker, because those were the two things that were changed in the original one that were all cut out. Because in the 50s there was no concept that horror could be funny, which is wild, because it's such a common thing afterwards. But anyway, because it takes away some of the humanity of the original movie, which is the whole point of the story, is the humanity. And so they decided, as they were filming, it's like, let's just do this ending like this. And apparently this MGM loved it, everybody was like, yeah, this is awesome. And apparently Donald Sutherland was like all for it. He's like, yeah, let's do this. And what I really like is that there is no music that plays in the credits. That humanity has been defeated.
Yep.
Yeah, this is a good flick. It's a real good flick. And yeah, it's one of those things that I think it was Pauline Kael who's like, this is the best example of this type of movie that could have ever been made. That's pretty high praise.
Interesting.
Yeah, but it's also interesting that Ebert found her how much she liked the movie to be inexplicable.
And damn near offensive, because he was anti-remake.
Yeah.
And he thought it has some sort of political, he didn't understand it.
He really didn't understand it. Yeah.
I think both he and Siskel went in against remakes.
Well, Siskel liked it, I think, though, right?
Well, he didn't like it, the fact that it was remade.
But he gave it 3 out of 4 stars or something. Thumbs up.
The doc was, it's a remake. Why couldn't they have just done something different? But I think Ebert went in anti-remake, and he missed it. He missed the boat on this one.
Yeah, he did.
But yeah, this is one of those things that then really propelled Kaufman, because like I said, he went on to do The Wanderers, which wasn't a huge hit, but got a lot of cult appreciation later. He co-wrote Raiders of the Lost Ark, but then he made The Right Stuff, which was huge. Both, again, speaking of Siskel and
massively long too.
Yeah, they both they both put that in their best of, they thought that was the best movie of the year when that came out.
Yeah, was that wasn't nominated for Best Picture, was it, or was it?
No,
yeah, it was nominated. It was nominated
for Best Picture. He did not get nominated for either the writing or the directing.
That's wild.
Yeah, it was one of those Best Picture nominations that doesn't get the other stuff that makes it a Best Picture. It's weird.
Yeah, it's a good movie. It's been a long time since I've seen it. I used to watch that a lot as a kid.
Yeah, he did get nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay for The Unbearable Lightness of Being, which was another one of those critical darlings. He made one of the first NC-17 movies with Henry and June, and he made Rising Sun, which I like. I like Rising Sun. It was not well liked by a lot of people, but I liked it.
Rising Sun, yeah, that was based on a Crichton novel, I think, right?
I believe so. And it was Sean Connery and Wesley Snipes.
Yeah. I remember that being pretty good. Quills, actually, I liked quite a bit as well. About the Marquis de Sade.
Yep. But yeah, no. So this is, the original one is, that's classic. If you like the old 50s sci-fi type stuff, this one and The Day the Earth Stood Still are considered to be the classics of that. The undisputed, and Thing from Another Planet is pretty good too, but it is not as deep as the other two. And I would say this movie plays, all of these movies play well with paranoia, but in slightly different ways. This one is not as heightened with the paranoia as the original, but it is there. It is underlying through the whole movie. And I think it does really, really well, again, with that shot composition where you are seeing a change happening. And it is kind of funny because, like they always make the joke about how, how, people in New York will not react to some stuff, right? Because it's like, crazy shit happens all the time. Well, you see it kind of happening here, which makes it, it makes it really, really interesting to try to figure out who is, who has been converted, who's reacting to it, and who doesn't have any idea that something is happening. Because I would imagine that a vast majority of people were converted before they had any idea that anything was different. So
I would agree. Otherwise, it wouldn't have worked. Probably.
Right, exactly. This is also the only movie that does really kind of work with the, we came from a dying world. We were just trying to find a new home, basically. And except for their existence would not work in any, if they were it would be one thing for them to be on a planet where they are the top of the food chain already, right? Doesn't work. You don't have as much sympathy for it when it has to force something else out. And in some ways it is a little bit of a play on how we how we treat our world. Like we go in and we cut up a bunch of forests, which is very bad for the ecology there. We are kind of invading upon that, so it kind of plays into that a little bit too. But yeah, this is a very, very smart thriller. It's not really a monster movie. It's not really a horror movie. It's a thriller because it forces you to think about like just how helpless this situation would ultimately be. And while, yeah, that does kind of devolve that third act, like you were saying, Jason, it's also probably a bleak reality that we would be screwed.
Sure. Yeah.
So anyway, I don't know what Ebert's talking about. This gets a thumbs up from me.
Yeah, thumbs up for me too. I like this movie quite a bit as well, but minus a few hesitations.
Sure. Yeah. It really does show that Donald Sutherland's just awesome.
Yeah. His crazy hair, man. He had some seriously curly hair.
Yeah. Chuck, how was your feelings on this? Outside of Man-Faced Dog.
Man-Faced Dog killed me. I liked the movie. I thought there were a lot of threads that were brought up that would have been great to be picked back up at the end. But overall, it's a solid movie. I liked it.
Yeah, I would be interested to see if they do ever make some sort of a series out of this, because I do think that there are a lot of things that can be looked at, because there are some things that kind of get brought up in the Abel Ferrara one too, where it's like, well, are they purposely trying to take over military installations, or did it just kind of happen? Right. If they escape the one in Alabama, does that mean that one in Texas is safe, or is it too late? There is something that you could kind of really, it would play well, if AMC wanted to do it and have it be the show that comes on after Walking Dead or something, it would play well together with that.
Right.
Except I would do it, which is weird because nobody likes the TV version of War of the Worlds from the 80s. That's going to show up on Monster Mondays later this summer. But anyway, I would like to see it like that, because that played with the paranoia a lot too.
Right.
Because the Martians are now kind of infiltrating as opposed to just trying to muscle their way. But anyway, I would like to see that happen.
I'd give it a shot for sure.
I'd give it a shot at least. Yeah. Absolutely. And it would give Jason what he wants, so I would hope he would watch.
I would watch. Yep.
Okay. Anyway, did we do it? Anything else to add with this?
I think covered it from my angle. Sorry, Jason, go ahead.
I don't. I'm good.
One thing I did want to bring up real quick was the score for this movie was Danny Zeitlin. This was the only score he ever did. Huh. He's a jazz musician, and I guess when he was scoring this movie, he was really, no pun intended, jazz to do it, because it's like, oh, that's neat. I've never really done a score like this. He purposely didn't watch or listen to the score of the original because he didn't want to be influenced. Yep. But he got to play around with a lot of the stuff that he was already familiar with, as far as like keyboards and synthesizers and stuff like that. He also tried to use different sound altering to kind of fold it into the movie a little bit more, to where you're not sure if you're listening to sound effects or a score. But apparently it was not a great experience for him, because he was so unused to making a score that, like, while he was scoring the movie, he was working like 20-hour days to complete it. And,
Yikes.
but he did very much like what he did, and it's good. In fact, I thought it sounded a little bit like Jerry Goldsmith's Planet of the Apes score in some scenes, and I was trying to figure out, I was like, did Goldsmith do this? But no.
Yeah, film score composition can be an arduous task. Like
Yeah.
I think they're a special breed of musicians and composers, because generally, you're right, they have a film that's been delivered,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's a release date, and they've got to fucking crank out that score in between. Sometimes they get access to dailies and they're composing along with that, but a lot of the time they don't have a lot of time to get it done.
And and you specifically ask, like, you would specifically ask John Williams if you wanted something that had a lot more French horn in it or something,
Right?
Or back in the old days, you would go to, like, especially in the 60s and early 70s, you would have gone to John Barry for a jazzier score, like they did with Denny Seitlin. So yeah, it's but then he, of course, he went more towards horns later. And I shouldn't say French horn for John Williams. That's more of a John Barry, but John Williams has a lot of brass in his. So yeah, the studios know who they want, or the director and producer know who they want. But yeah, it's just a matter of, can you get the guy, and can he deliver?
Yep.
But I would suspect that if you got Goldsmith or Barry or Williams, you were going to get what you wanted. It's just a matter of, could you pay him?
Yeah, or you were gonna get what they gave you, and you were gonna like it too.
Right. Well, there's that. But yeah. Sure. Yeah. I mean, but you wouldn't go to those guys unless you wanted their sound.
Yeah. Sure.
But anyway, so yeah. All right. Well, good stuff, guys. Next week at filmseizure.com and all of those fine places where podcasts are found, we are going to talk about James Caan in Thief.
Oh yeah,
Thief.
Yeah. I'm excited to revisit that one. That's a Michael Mann movie that was kind of a late watch for me. Like, I watched a lot of his movies before I got around to that one. It's good.
Yeah, it's real good.
I love the score. All the score is so good.
Yeah,
I have some things to say about it.
Yep. So that's going to be next week. That should be very, very, very good stuff. And that's might be. It's definitely available through Criterion. I don't know if it's on the Criterion channel currently or not, but
it's been on and off. I'm not sure if it's on there. I have the old Blu-ray Criterion release.
I do too. But anyway, so yeah, that's next Wednesday. Next Monday, or this upcoming Monday, Monster Mondays is diving into something that I've been wanting to get into this year a little bit more, is because there's a lot of good TV monsters. And to kind of crack the seal on that, I'm going to talk about the first Kolchak movie, The Night Stalker.
Cool.
It's fucking cool. Good, man. Kolchak's so good. But that is a 75-minute movie, because it was only an hour and a half TV movie. That is one of my longer episodes, because there's a lot to talk about. Kolchak's cool. But anyway, that is on Monday, filmseizure.com, all of those normal places. This Friday at my website, bmovieenema.com, I am in the third week of Tinto Brass Month with Private, aka Fallow, which also, if you look at the poster, looks phallic. But it's an anthology. It's hit or miss. It's fine. It's fine. It's not as good as the Nazi movie. Oh God, there's so many buttholes. So many buttholes this month. Anyway. So anyway, that's this Friday at filmseizure.com. film.com. So check those things out. Follow us, Facebook, Twitter, Film Seizure. You can find us there. Instagram also, if you want to know when things are coming out. But until next week, when we steal away with Thief, I am Jeff Arbuckle.
I'm Chuck Moore.
I'm Jason Oliver, and you have been listening to Film Seizure.